Okay, great. Let's go. So welcome everybody to the information event for the Data Lab Msc Placement Program. I am recording it, so if you don't want to appear, please do turn off your camera. My name is Msc Pachinski. I'm the Msc Placement Business Development Officer here at the Data Lab. I started 2 months ago today, actually. No, 2 months ago at the end of the week. And yes, I'm part of bringing the placements team in-house this year at the Data Lab. So today I'm going to talk about what the placement program is, how you can get involved, and what you can gain from it. But first, I'll just give a brief overview of the Data Lab in general for those on the call that don't know us that well. So the Data Lab, what is it? We're the Innovation Centre for AI and Data. We were founded in 2014, and our mission is to help Scotland maximise value from data and to lead the world to a data-powered future. We're here to accelerate Scotland's data journey through innovation and industry-academia collaboration, nurturing skills, thriving talent, and strengthening Scotland's thriving data community. Organisations don't always have the cutting-edge skills and in-depth expertise needed to make the most of their data. That's why we help organisations to access the academic or specialist expertise and project support that they need to build effective partnerships and innovate successfully with data. We use our network to match organisations with the right academic or specialist partners, facilitating one-to-one partnerships as well as multi-party collaborations. We provide expertise, guidance, and support to help scope and manage projects wherever organisations may be in their data journey. And we fund academic or institution costs related to industry academia collaborations or help business access external sources of funding. The Data Lab Msc Placement Program plays a big part in our support for business to innovate and how they use and derive value from data. As more and more businesses become data-driven, demand for data talent only continues to grow. The aim of the Skills and Talent team at this Data Lab is to plug the skills gap in Scotland. We believe that our wider workforce needs a broader set of skills that will allow them to understand and creatively solve business and societal problems using data. That's why we work with industry to make sure people across sectors have the opportunity to gain the skills they need to apply groundbreaking data science in the real world. In addition to the Msc Placement Program, we also deliver a PhD work placement scheme and funded industrial doctorates, as well as a range of professional development courses available to individuals and organisations across Scotland. Scotland has the potential to lead the world in data science. Scotland's thriving data science community is already proving that. The best way to fulfill our potential is to bring together people from across a range of sectors and backgrounds so they can connect, share, and work together. This is why we create opportunities for our growing community to come together, move data science forward, and make an impact in Scotland. The culmination of our very own Data Fest, Data Summit, took place just last week at the Balmoral. It was a great celebration of the burgeoning data community in Scotland, with a range of talks on diverse subjects, including the rise of deepfakes and the use of data in tackling the pandemic and climate change. The next big event coming up in the Data Fest roster will be Data Talent. We'll be running a Data Talent event in March, hopefully in person, hopefully, fingers crossed. And there is opportunity for organisations who are actively recruiting to have an exhibit at the event. If this might be of interest, do let me know. And the same goes for any of the other Data Lab activities I've just covered. If it's not directly in my wheelhouse, I can always point you in the right direction for someone who will know all about it. So now onto the Data Lab MSc program, and I'll hand over to Marianne, who is the program manager for the Data Lab MSc.
Thank you very much, Max. I'll
stop sharing.
Okay, I'll start sharing. So I recognise quite a few faces on the call today, so welcome everyone. It's great to see you here. So my name is Marianne Dunbar, and I'm the manager of the Data Lab MSc program, which is a program that brings together 155 students funded this year who are studying data science and AI courses across Scotland at 11 universities. We've developed a programme that takes those students who are receiving really excellent academic courses in their home universities, and we give additional skills. We give them the opportunity to learn how to apply the academic knowledge, to practice the skills that they've learned in real working environments, so that we can enhance their soft skills and non-technical skills and therefore make them a much better data scientist. So we deliver this programme through partnership. We've developed it through collaboration too, and there are lots of parts of the Scottish data community that are involved with us and support what we do. So we work with Scottish universities, a number of delivery partners, the data science community in the widest possible sense, our funders, of course, because we couldn't do what we do without them, without the Scottish Funding Council and the European Social Fund, and also the many Scottish Scottish organisations that support us in so many different ways. The numbers, up to this year, 884 students have been funded through the Data Lab MSc programme. The students all receive a fully funded scholarship. So the courses that we support across Scotland vary in nature, from highly technical AI courses at Aberdeen, Strathclyde and Stirling, through to more domain orientated courses such as the MSc in Health Data Science. So the information on the courses that we support for this year is on the website if you want to have a look there. And also, as you can see from this list, we do support 31 different courses, all of which have data science at their core. The scholarship, or the programme, is unique in that we offer scholarships which cover fees and a free programme which includes a certified MOOC on data ethics. Every course that is supported by the Data Lab has been through an approval process, and we do ensure that data ethics are taught on the courses, but to make sure that we have a level playing field and a really strong understanding of data ethics, all of our students must complete a certified MOOC. We have a lot of networking and community building events, employability facilitation training and opportunities, of which the placement programme is a huge part, and an industry sponsored innovation challenge. So networking and community building is a big part of what the Data Lab does generally, but very specifically is a really huge part of what we do on the MSc programme. We get the students together at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, at Data Talent, as you can see there. That was the last in-person Data Talent, so we're really looking forward to that experience this year. Our students join the Data Lab community platform, our LinkedIn group, and we have various other opportunities for them to meet with each other, with us and with the wider data science community, to root them really firmly in that community, you know, as they move forward from students into their career. And that community continues beyond the Data Lab MSc programme. We ran an alumni event last week. We had 100 students from 7 academic years attending there, and we had a jolly good time, I must say. So employability facilitation is a really, really key part of the programme. And this year we have brought that part of the programme in-house with Sarah Scythe and Max Pachinski delivering employability skills sessions. So they have met with the students, they've taken them through interviewing, CV skills, they are reviewing their CVs so that when they complete the programme and when they move on to the placement, they are in a really good position to give a really strong account of their skills. We also take our students through a communicating, collaborating and presenting in an online world course, which I think is really, really important in this COVID and post-COVID era, when so much of what we do is delivered remotely. Students and all of us need to be able to communicate in all mediums, including online. And much of this is informing students about how best to present themselves for the placement programme. Placement programme is a huge part of what we do. So just before I move on to Innovation Week, it is really fantastic that we have an in-house team now, because they will really get to know the students and can really help them through all the milestones that they'll reach through the programme, including preparing them for the placement. Innovation Week takes place in May, June, and that is an opportunity for the students to work together, to learn some new approaches, design thinking, and to really get stuck into a data challenge in teams, so that they're developing their soft skills, they're developing their technical skills, they're working remotely, and that is timed so that it leads the students from that point. The students go into their placement, so they've had real experience of what it might be like working on a data challenge in a collaborative environment. This year we've badged the MSc programme, which is a great innovation. It means that we will be able to better articulate what we do to our students and also to our employers. So you'll hear about that more. Our funding call for next year opens on Friday. We will have 75 scholarships. I'm just mentioning that in case there are any universities here on the call. That's just a run through what we're doing. We're here today to find out about placements. There are lots of stories on the website, so if you want to read more about placements past and everything else that we do on the MSc programme, then that's where you should go to. So that's all for me for just now.
Thanks, Marianne. Marianne has to drop off the call, so if anyone has any quick questions just now around the wider programme and not placement specifically, feel free to put your hand up or dive in. Otherwise, her fountain of knowledge will be disappearing. So
I'll be back. I'll come back after.
Are you coming back?
Yeah,
okay,
I'll come back after.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll be here for questions. Okay.
Brilliant. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Great. So let's move on. So onto the MSc Placement Program itself in a little bit more detail. The Msc Placement Project is a great way to connect our MSc students with our industrial partners, with all the great companies out there using data science and driving value from data. And the Placement Project forms the basis for the MSc students' research dissertation. So it takes place towards the end of their master's course, usually over the summer. For the majority of the cohort this year, they started their course in September. So they will be doing their dissertation project over summer, so starting May, June, and through to August. We do have a cohort starting in January 2022, so they'll be on a slightly later project timeline. So they'll be finishing their masters, doing their research project kind of September, October through to December. So if that's of interest, do let me know, because we can look at that as well. So for their dissertation project, they have 8 to 12 weeks to spend on a data science-based project. It can vary in focus depending on their course, and as you saw with the list of courses that Marianne showed us, it's quite large, it's quite varied, and so it can cover lots of different areas. They will need time on their placement to write their dissertation too. So we recommend that there are at least 2 weeks between the project end date and their submission date, or we build time into their working day to enable them to work on their dissertation whilst they're on their placement. If that's not possible, then we do recommend shortening the project, so not 12 weeks, but kind of 10 weeks in that same time. And as it forms a significant proportion, a third of the grading for their MSc degree, then all projects must be self-contained and completable within that 8 to 12 week timeframe. That's really important and really key. Moving on to the benefits. So why do one? So the whole host of benefits to hosting an MSc student for a placement. You get access to highly motivated data talent and people who are keen to put their new technical skills into good use in the real world. Students are from a really wide variety of backgrounds as well. So some are coming straight from undergrad, but others have years, decades even of professional experience, and they can bring fresh perspective and a different energy to your organization as well. And for your organization, the program can be a really good opportunity to get projects off the ground. So whether that's exploring new areas or a proof of concept, or putting some projects into play that have maybe been on the back burner for a while, some kind of important non-urgent projects that you haven't been able to get around to because you haven't had the time, haven't had the resources, they can be a really good option for an MSc placement, kind of bring those out and tackle them. And as I said, students have a whole range of specializations on their courses. So some are doing the AI machine learning kind of piece, others on the data engineering side of things. So whatever would be useful for your organization and what you want to achieve, we probably have someone that we can match you up with on the MSc courses. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Joanna McKenzie, who's a principal data scientist here at the Data Lab. And she'll be able to talk a bit more about projects, what makes for a good one for an MSc placement, and how to go about scoping it.
Yes, hi, it's a pleasure to be here and talking to everybody today. I will bring up my slides. And remember how you can cope, how you do Zoom. And here we go. So I wanted to talk today about the process of scoping out a master's placement project. And there's sort of two stages to this. There's the initial idea, and that can only come from the relevant organisation. You're the ones that know what value you can have from this. You're the one who know your own organisation. So that part of it comes from you as your initial idea. But there's a second part of it, which is this process of preparing for the student coming into your organisation and being able to support them and being ready to support them. And that's where we can really help you go through the correct process to make sure you're thinking about the right things. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. So there's no doubt that a 3-month master's placement can be a really valuable experience, not just for the student, but also for the organisation, especially if you're stepping outside your comfort zone and wanting to look at proof of concept style ideas of new things that you might be able to explore in your organisation. But it's undoubtedly true that there are some potential risks. Students, although some of our students are quite professionally experienced, some of them are still straight out of university, and they can struggle to learn how to communicate well with the organisation in the 3-month window that they have for their placement. 3 months can be quite a tight time scale, especially if there's any delays getting started. It's not as long as you think it might be when you start. And the organisation can also struggle to communicate effectively with the student because both the student and the organisation will have blind spots with respect to the other's capabilities, as is always true when you step outside your comfort zone. It's always going to be the case. But a lot of these risks can be mitigated by a bit of prior scoping work. So if you said to a project manager, why should I scope my project? They would say, is that not a little bit like, why should I breathe? Because obviously you have to scope your project. And data projects aren't actually in any way different to this, but it can be a little bit tempting to just say, well, here's the data, on you go and get on with it. A little bit of work up front can be really valuable. It can help you make sure all your different partners are aligned. So whether that's your student and your organisation, or also maybe the academic supervisor for the student. These are all partners in this project, and they should all be aligned on what the aims are and what the priorities are. Really simplifies your decision-making process if you've got the scope done up front. And for an organisation that doesn't have experience delivering this type of project, it can be quite challenging to scope, which is why we thought it's worthwhile including this information in this event today. So what is a data project? This is the way I've most often explained a data project. You start with a set of data. You've got some information, there's data there. You need to identify what actually you want to know from it. What insight is it you're looking for? How often do you want it? And once you have that, the data project is the process of connecting the data with the insight. So whether you have to do machine learning, whether you have to build a dashboard, whether you have to create graphs and do some analysis, what you're essentially doing is you're taking raw data that's not been processed and you're putting into a format that people can understand. And your data science student, your the person on the placement, it has the role of breaking down that data project into its component parts, understanding how you make it work, understanding how you build the tool, and making that insight available for whoever it is that's needing the project. That's a nice understanding of what a data project can generally look like. So our role as an organisation supporting a student is about supporting them, is about setting up a context and an environment where they can deliver that data project. So that's essentially what we need from organisations hosting these projects. The students should start on day one with clarity on what data they're using, what expectations you have for the project, and they should understand why this is valuable. And I think sometimes we skimp on making sure they understand that, but the process of delivering a data project is a process of making many, many micro decisions all the time. And if they don't understand the reason, their choices that they'll make during their project will probably not be the best projects. So it's a really good idea to make sure they understand why this is valuable to you as an organisation and what it helps you do. So let's set the context. What we've done at the Data Lab is we've started to develop a pack, and it's got some key things to consider in scoping a project. So the key context that we're looking at here, we start with the background to the project. We think about the data. We think about the skills. We think about the project communication, so how you support the student day to day. And then we're looking at some risks. And these are the key things that we think you should be thinking about when you're setting up a project for a master's student. So considering these in advance, it kind of helps you remove common pitfalls, and it actually reduces the risk of delays, which I think is a key purpose here, a key process. So the first part of it is straightforwardly the background. This should be bread and butter to you as an organisation. You should know exactly what it is you want to do and why you want to do it. So it shouldn't be difficult to do, but it's very worthwhile to put it down in simple terms on paper, because the academic supervisor for the student and the student themselves will not share that knowledge of that context. And it is very much worthwhile spending a little time putting that down on paper and making sure it's clear. I think the data is the most important part and the place where it's easiest to get things wrong and to cause delays on the project. So we've set up a data checklist of things that you could think about to make sure the data is there and ready and accessible for the student on day one. And in fact, if I don't know how well you can read this little image of this slide that I've put up here, the first option here is the best option we've put down, and it's I am clear what data the student will need to access for this project for all relevant data sources. Everything is clear. But we've also got a backup option, which is essentially that the project itself has been designed such that the student identifies these data sources. You can see immediately that that's going to be slower because it's going to take up time for the student doing that wouldn't necessarily be needed if it was done up front. So you've always got that trade-off between the work that you put in up front, which sets the student up for success. The student themselves can bring a certain number of skills in some of these areas with them, and that can be part of the project. But if it is, it displaces something else that could be part of the project. And everybody who's worked in an organisation of any sort has probably experienced the delays that you can get in trying to access IT systems. And remember that a data science student are trying to do a data project is likely to want quite advanced access to these systems. That can be a blocker, it can be a difficult thing to set up, and it is worth putting time in advance, making sure that the right person knows that this is happening. The credentials can all be set up in time and the student can sit down on their desk day one, maybe day 3 at the latest, with the data that they need right in front of them. These sorts of things are the sorts of things that can cause massive headaches if they don't go well. So skills. One thing that's important to bear in mind is that you're not employing the student per se, you're bringing them in as part of their skills development. They're there to learn. So the organisation needs to be thinking about what they can bring in, but they also need to be thinking about how you can develop them. And it might be on their data science capability, because they will be doing a project and you do learn through delivering projects, but it might also be about understanding the business context that you're working in, or to working with stakeholder developments, or getting used to liaising with IT on various systems. These are all valuable things that organisations can give to students. This is quite a long list that we've put in here, and it's intended to be quite broad so that it covers almost all projects. But of course, hardly any projects will involve development or competencies in all of these things. So it's kind of a pick and choose what's relevant for your organisation, rather than an expectation that you should build a project that can deliver everything. for your student. So we thought it was worth talking about communication because everybody who's onboarded somebody, especially in a virtual environment that we've been working in now, will understand that you have to be a lot more mindful and intentional in how you communicate with people. There's an awful lot less of casual conversations that just happen in practice. So in acknowledgement of that world that we've all gotten used to, we're encouraging you to think about the communication between the student and their line manager in your organisation or their supervisor in your organisation, but also any stakeholders. Because one of the things that if a student is particularly new to outside academic context, they might not be adept yet at identifying their own stakeholders and reaching out to people for support. So worthwhile having that little bit of support in there and being clear who's the first port of call, who's going to be making the decisions, and do they know how to get hold of them. So regular formal, regular informal communication channels, just to make sure you're on top of what's going on. And then project risks. Mostly this is provided because the whole point of scoping it is to reduce the risks that the student will not be successful in the placement in delivering not just their dissertation, but also the value that you're hoping to achieve through having them in your organisation. So there's a few bits and pieces in there that is worthwhile for you as an organisation to be aware of when you're bringing the student in. And we've put in the place some risk mitigation that we as an organisation, the Data Lab, have learned over time can really support the student to succeed through these things. So just to bring everything together, we've got our student and they've got their data project to deliver, and we've got a context that they're delivering it in. Ideally, there's going to be different spaces where the data project needs a connection to the context in order for the student to be successful. So things like data, it can be a big blocker. You can't get started on a data project if you don't have data. So making sure you provide the right data in the right format at the right time, and that the student knows who to speak to about it and how to get past any problems. That is all part and parcel of setting up the right context for the data project to succeed. Similarly, IT can be a big blocker. They might need a laptop from your organisation. They might need systems access. They might need IT support if that's the way your organisation runs. All of these things can be a blocker. If they're not there, they stop the project happening, and a lack of connection to that context can really cause problems. And then people. So who's there to support? Who makes decisions? So if you get to a point and you can't proceed any further without somebody saying yay or nay to a particular approach, who is it that gets to make that call? And does the student know who that is, and can they speak to them? And what if it goes wrong? In the places where things start to go wrong, where does the student turn for support? Where can they get help? So these are the spaces where you as an organisation can expect the student to need support, and you can do a little bit of preparing to bring them through that. And if it does go wrong, well, the same systems that work for projects generally will also work for data projects. First thing is, if you have a clear idea, if you've scoped out what you want to achieve, you can use that to keep you right as things change and to help you with your decision-making process. Your student will be able to advise on the data end. They will have enough knowledge, and they will have the ability to do some research if that's needed. So you can involve them in the decision-making process, especially in the data sense, in the space of the data project. Ultimately, as the organisation that's hosting the project, it's your role to keep your eye on the end goal for your organisation and make sure that project will eventually add value for you. So for some organisations, especially if you're outside your comfort zone, the technical feasibility part can be the hardest part of project scoping. The student's academic supervisor might be able to advise during that scoping stage. And if you do need help, the data scientist, myself and my team at the Data Lab can provide a bit of support on feasibility and methodology. Is that possible? And can it be done with the data that you've got? These are the things that we can help you to assess. We can also help you judge the timescales and whether the difficulty is about right for a master's student, or whether you're looking at an academic professor to deliver that particular project. So it can be helpful to have a technical person that's able to do these things and deliver that bit of feasibility. And that's me.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Does anyone have any questions for Joanna at this stage?
I've gone very dark. Hadn't realised.
I had one question, Max.
Yeah, go for it.
Is that okay? Yeah, so that's really, really helpful. And I'd ask for slides because that's obviously going to give us a brilliant model to sort of do our own internal thinking. And then, but do you have any sort of anonymized examples you can share at any point or anything like that? Just to, because obviously the better we get that, the better sort of start we get off to. So are there any other resources we should be looking at?
I've definitely seen one document that has a few examples. I think it has like 4 examples of different kind of levels, which I can send over. I don't know, Joanna, if there was anything else on top of that.
I'm not aware of anything particularly formal, but there's been a few case studies and things that are about there, so we should be able to pull something together for you. That should help.
Yeah, there are lots of case studies on the website as well, which can give some inspiration, I suppose. Yeah.
Yep, there's a question in the chat about how we contact the data scientists at the data lab. You'll get us through any of the data lab channels. So of course, if you go through Max or Marianne, they'll be able to forward us on. And there's an info@datalab email address as well.
I was just going to suggest it's maybe something for the Q&A at the end, but there's quite a few people on this call today who have participated in the programme before, who may be willing to volunteer to provide some examples on this call today as to the sorts of projects that they've had that have been successes, and even on the other side of that, maybe some that haven't worked so well. That would be an open invitation to anyone who would be willing to share that information. Yeah,
that would be great if you get thinking, and then I'll
stick your hands up or drop your name into the chat if you'd be willing to share with us today. That would be really appreciated.
Be brilliant.
Great. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like there are many more questions just now, so I'll continue on, and then we can get on to that sharing. Okay. Cool.
Thanks, Robert. We'll come back to you on that. Thank you. That's Robert from ST Microelectronics volunteered to share, so we'll pull him
in. Cool. So we've heard about scoping out a project. So I thought we'd move on to some key info. So all students need to be employed by the host organisation and paid at least the national living wage, which that's going up to £9.50 on April the 1st next year for those over 23, which I think will be most of the students. There might be some who are under that, but there is a link to that in our terms and conditions. But yes. So you'll need to do that. Also, we're keen that they become an employee of the company. We have had some companies use a sort of contract arrangement previously, and that's caused some issues. So that's very important. Students will usually work full-time on the project, so 35 to 40 hours, depending on your organisation's usual work week. If you're interested in offering a part-time project, we do have some part-time students who might be interested, but obviously that then limits the scope of what they can achieve. And for them, it's sort of a 30 credit module as opposed to a 60 credit module. So that will temper what's possible. Obviously, we're happy to accommodate all working styles, whether that's in-person, remote, hybrid working, all of those. Obviously, we expect organisations to follow the latest government guidelines in regards to COVID, particularly with what's going on at the minute, and to make sure that your MSc student feels comfortable and supported as well. So, if they are working fully remotely, making sure they know who their points of contact are and kind of keeping that engagement going and keeping them in the loop. As Joanna was saying, students will need access to all the technology and data sets for their projects, hopefully from day one, if not by day 3, so they can really hit the ground running. Those 12 weeks or less can really fly by, particularly getting things set up, and then with the write-up as well. It's really important to be able for them to get in and get working on their projects. And so the quicker we can get things moving with HR, IT, all of those internal processes, that's really important too, particularly before they start. So in the run-up, I know background checks at some places can be quite tricky, so key to get that moving. All students will have a dedicated academic supervisor from their university, and they'll need a dedicated person at the host organisation. And we recommend that all three people, the student, academic and industry supervisor, meet together every week if possible, just to ensure that any issues are kind of flagged early, check on the progress direction of the project. And if there are difficulties that are arising that aren't being solved, then the data lab team is also here, so that can be escalated to us and we can try and help mediate that. Any IP agreements or restrictions and or NDA requirements can be discussed before, or should be discussed and resolved before the placement starts. IP normally resides with the company with the stipulation that the student has access to the elements required to complete their dissertation. Oh, it's back, sorry. And the academic supervisor will be the main point of contact on IP issues and NDAs as those agreements between the host organisation and the university. So where do we go from here? If you've got some projects in mind or some even just ideas of what might be useful for your organisation, time to start scoping them out. I can share Joanna's slides. We also have a sort of a PDF, which was half of the slides there that she was sharing to kind of how you think about putting it all down and getting it scoped out. Once you're happy that's in good shape, then I can send over a submissible form and you can submit the project through that. That will go back to, that will also ask you to kind of rate the project in various skills, which is important for the matching process. I'll explain a bit more about that later. But once you've submitted via the project via submissible, that will come into the data lab team. We'll go over it, make sure that it looks feasible within the time frame and that it's all up to scratch. If not, we'll get that back to you with suggested improvements and get you to resubmit it. But we'll try and turn that around pretty quickly. And once that's all signed off, then the placement team, so that's Sarah and I, we will spring into action, and I'll explain a bit more about that. And then we'll send over who we think is the top candidate for your project. And we'll send over their CV and help organize a project meeting. Ideally, we'd like to get host organization, the student and academic supervisor involved from the very beginning, so everyone is on the same page and you can iron out any sort of potential risks or technical areas that need discussing. If you have any concerns over the student that we've sent over, either at CV stage or after the project meeting, that's fine, just let us know. But kind of we really need some concrete feedback. So, it's a machine learning project and they don't have the required skills, fine, go back into the pool, find someone who's got the required skills. But yeah, so we can take that on board and find you a better match from the pool. And hopefully the first one, it all goes well. If not, the second one, but when you're happy with your match and the meeting goes well and you've ironed out all the kinks, then just let us know. We'll start getting the paperwork in place, send over the agreement, and it's time for you then to get any internal mechanisms moving from boarding and get that in motion as early as possible. And then placement will start. And once placement is underway, we'll follow up with you. So we'll probably follow up with you at the beginning, somewhere partway through, and then after the project's finished. If everything is going to plan and no extra input is needed. And then on the back of that, hopefully we'll have some really great stories. So we might follow up with you for case studies and rope you into this meeting next year. New for this year, so there are a couple of changes for this year, which even some of our regular host organizations on the call. So the initial matching this year is being handled by the gigged platform. So it's being matched by their algorithm. And the initial matching is based on skills. So we get all of our students to input their profiles on the gigged platform and to rank themselves in certain skills from technical skills, say R or Python, through to kind of data viz and different, as well as also some soft skills. We're getting them to rank this year as well. When you submit the project placement form, we'll also ask you about those skills, so it'll be based on those ratings that the initial matches happen. There is also a human element, so the platform will suggest the top 5 candidates as it thinks, at which point Sarah and I, we've met all of the students, we've done one-to-one CV reviews with them, so we have a bit of an idea about them and about their interests and their skill set. We'll then discuss that, we'll have a look at it and pick who we think is the top candidate, or if there's someone who stood out and we think actually for this project they might be a really good fit, then we'll bring them in, because we are testing it out this year, so we want to make sure that the algorithm is actually bringing up the best candidates. For you, that won't make much difference, as we'll just be sending over the top candidate, but we just wanted to let you know. This year is also the last year of our European Social Fund support. So this is going to drastically reduce our ability to deliver the MSc programme. So we'll have to cut the number of scholarships by more than half. So going from 155 scholarships this year to 75 next year. And we're trying to find ways to mitigate this funding shock and maintain our impact across Scotland. And so we're looking at ways to raise funds. So this year, we're introducing a fee for placements that lead to further employment of students within 12 months at the end of the project. So whether that's a permanent position or a longer term fixed contract. And the fee will be commensurate with the size of the organisations. That ranges from a £5,000 fee for larger private companies down to no fee for public and third sector organisations. We're hoping that this contribution from some of our partners who benefit from the MSc programme will allow us to continue doing the great work that we've been doing for the past 7 years. But of course, we only want to ask for help from companies that benefit. So if that further employment doesn't work out, for whatever reason, in the first 3 months, then we'll return 100% of that contribution. And then finally, so the key dates for this year. So the submission deadline for students will be the 7th of January, 2022, so just after Christmas. So that means we'll have the pool of MSc students ready, and they'll be ready to be matched to projects. We can accept project submissions from now until the beginning of May, but bear in mind that students will be being matched from January. So as we move through the year, that means the pool of potential candidates gets smaller. So if you want access to the widest pool of students, we want projects in by the end of Jan, really. So really get moving. The programme will continue to be open to submissions until all students have been matched. And then obviously, students do need to do, if they're not going to do an industrial placement, they will need to do a research project. So we need to let them know in good time if they're not going to be matched. So that's really important that we get moving on that. It's also worth noting that last year, we received a grant from Scottish Government, a very short notice, which supported SMEs to participate in the programme. Whilst this was a great thing to happen, and it attracted an increased number of organisations to the programme in a very short time frame between January and March. And so by the end of March, all the students had been matched. And so other organisations who had taken a bit longer to get their projects in ended up missing out, which was, we really want to avoid this year. So again, another reason to move as quickly as possible. At the minute, we're not aware that that grant funding will come through next year. But if this is going to change, we'll communicate that as soon as possible. And yes, and then finally, as Marianne mentioned, Innovation Week is also a key thing to take note of. So all our students will be taking part in that, and that's between the 30th of May and the 3rd of June. So if the project is starting before then, they'll need that week off to be able to attend Innovation Week and the Data Challenge. So I think that we do have a handful of students who need to start their projects earlier in May. So we'll look at that and we'll talk about that with organisations where that's important. And that's all. So yeah, I just want to say thanks to Marianne and Joanna for their presentations, and yes, we can move into questions and also open up to some of our host organisations who've done it all before and be able to share their experiences. If you do need to, I'm going to stop sharing this, but I'll share it again after the Q&A. But if you do need to contact me, contact us. There's my email address, but there's also the placements inbox, which if I've not responded or I'm on holiday, is picked up by everyone. I'll stop sharing there. I think there were quite a few questions in the chat, as I saw them coming up. Okay. So, sorry, Heather, was it Rob? Oh, hi, Jerry.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Jerry, you've got your hand up. Do you want to
go? Just to say, Max, thanks. Just thanks for the presentation there. I just say we've had a great experience in bringing on students through the Msc program, and you know, it's great both for the students' experience of the real world working. I work in the Scottish Government. We've brought in students into the Scottish Government, and you know, their placement worked very well for us too, because you know, bringing the sort of data science skills into governments, you know, really good for us to benefit from what they're doing at university and the likes. And as you've summed up very well too, the important things to look for when you're creating a project, put forward a project proposal, things about access to data itself and the likes, and also realising the students got between 8 and 12 weeks as well is quite important, that they've not got a whole year to do it in, so be reasonable. And I think too, the aspect of working with the student, the university academic supervisor, and the placement people to working together to understand the goals they're looking for, they're really important. So I think we'd very much support, and hopefully we'll have some projects to put forward to the scheme this year. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry. And Robert, I think you were going to share your experience as well.
Okay, yeah. So I represent a company called ST Microelectronics. So I'm hoping that will give you an idea of some of the things that we're doing. So you can see something flashing there, which you will not normally see. Oh, you can probably see some of my messages as well. So that's the kind of products that we're responsible for. Products going into consumer electronics that are about optical detection and ranging, and I'm part of the technology development group. One of the things that we've identified is that we need to make more use of our data and our knowledge assets within the organization. And as we're one of Europe's largest, we are Europe's largest semiconductor manufacturer, but we're quite behind, and in general the whole industry is quite behind the curve in terms of using machine learning and AI. Maybe in implementation to products, we're not so far behind, but certainly in terms of our development processes. So we currently have 2 PhDs funded partly through the data lab at the moment. One looking at knowledge management, topic modeling, natural language processing, so we can pull information out of the massive documentation data sets that we have. And the other one looking at a kind of active learning classification problem to try to assist engineers to be able to better sort through the data that they have available. And we've also run 3, in line with that second PhD project, we've also ran 1 last year and 2 this year, projects looking at how we can better use machine learning models that we have available to us, and how we can cut down, for example, the training time, the time for us to prepare and to put together a machine learning model. And that's the kind of work that we've been doing. They're all excellent students. two from maths and computing science background, and one from a biology background, then transferring into data science. And one of the great things about this is that you're bringing new ideas into the organisation, you're bringing new ways of looking at things into the organisation, and quite often you have one of these discussions where because I've got experience in the industry, you think in certain ways, and then someone asks a question and you're, all right, okay. So, you know, we can start to bring together different ideas, different techniques. I would say in terms of putting the projects together, I've found that really very, very straightforward. I think all of the things that have been discussed so far are very clear from a project management point of view, having a clear idea of what you want to achieve, making sure that you've got everything in place to be able to put it together. And then just making sure you've got all the tools that the student's going to need to complete the project, and making sure that the supervision is there. So I would say that's maybe my experience from 3 excellent MSc projects and 2 ongoing PhD projects.
Excellent. And how did you select the MSc projects? Was that kind of a natural process of just things you wanted to do, or?
Well, as I say, the MSc projects are all kind of related to this classification problem, and what we're trying to do is we can't really run, because we're working on research and development, we can't really run unsupervised learning. That would be more applied to something that we would do in production, where it's very clear the outputs that you're looking for. And it's very clear the difference, the classes of defects that you would be getting. But what we're looking to do is to try and leverage that kind of activity that we have to bring it back into the R&D phase, where you're dealing with much higher variability. You're dealing with different classes of features that you need to have separated out to help the engineer work with them, and then the engineer needs to be able to interact with that. But when you're dealing with easily hundreds of thousands of graphs, or hundreds of thousands, or what would be graphs, or hundreds of thousands of images, or hundreds of thousands of pieces of data, you know, it's not in the big data domain at that point. It's not like what we have in manufacturing, where we're dealing with millions of pieces of data per day. It's still too large for the human to deal with, and looking to try to bring that kind of consistency and systematic classification that comes from machine learning, but given that interaction to the engineer as well. And that really fitted in quite well as kind of side investigative projects to the main work of the PhD that we have at the moment as well.
Excellent. So they were kind of offshoots of something you were already doing that were useful, but
basically proof of concept. So one that we've had this year is about how do we reuse an already existing machine learning image classifier without retraining it, because if we retrain it, we change the behavior against any historical performance, and that historical performance is linked into our root cause analysis for yield detractors. So we don't want that to change, because if something appears again, we want to be able to quickly debug. So we don't want to change that behavior. And because these things are inherently non-linear in the way that they behave, you know, you really kind of want to seriously question, when you're in a production run, whether or not you want to retrain your model, because you will not get the same behavior. So if we want to extend the classes, that's a proof of concept that we have finishing just now, that we can quite easily use other techniques to access the data that's inside the model and extend the classes that it's classifying, so that we can extend the usage of the model but retain the original model behavior. So that for example was one of them.
Great. And what would your top tips be for anyone if it's their first year and they're looking to take on an MSc student?
I would say, if you're struggling, if you're struggling for how data science, machine learning, AI could help you, then have a chat with the people at the data lab. If you're aware of anybody within the universities, have a chat with them as well. I think they're always very open to discussing new ideas, and would be really happy to be involved in new collaborations as well. But basically I would say doing the basics, making sure that once you've come to your decision about what your project needs to solve, even if it's simply a problem statement that you think data science can help with, share that as soon as you can, get some feedback in that, and then develop the ideas and put together the outline project scope. I think one of the things that's quite good to do is not to have a fully closed scope of the project. If it's too closed, then you have a lack of flexibility for the student, and certainly for the student to bring new ideas to it. So leaving some areas that are open for the student to investigate and to bring new ideas to can be really, or at least I've found that really quite essential.
Great, that's really good advice. Thank you. Actually, yeah, I should have, Jerry, I might come back to you and ask you what your top tips are as someone who's worked with the data lab quite a lot.
Yeah, I'll try to unmute myself and start my video, which is not too easy to now. My video's not starting. I'll have to assume I'm here. Top tips, I think, again, we covered a lot of things in terms of, quite important too, you mentioned the deadlines. Get your application in early, because the earlier you get the application in, the more choice you get. So that's really important. Again, for the project, make sure you've got access to the data, and particularly the government data, because sometimes it can be quite sensitive or etc. It needs permissions to get access to people. So really important to make sure if you've got a project that the data is available from day one. And again, I think I've said too, in terms of, a clear what it is you're trying to do in your project, what the goals, how you'll use data to get there. Don't worry about the process techniques and the likes, but just be clear about what you want to get as outcomes, and that it will use some kind of data science techniques to do it, or sort of clever data techniques to use it. And I suppose also, given where we are mainly working from home, realise that, and therefore you need to support the student, because if students haven't had work experience before, it can be quite a thing to work with people you've never met in your life before. I think that's important. And I suppose, also in terms of the project, and we're always keen, it's real life work, what we're doing in government, and as Robert before spoke, these are real life situations. And what are the business benefits, to be clear, and then it helps the student too to say, this is, I'm not just doing something that's been made up, this is benefiting the organisation. And I suppose too, just the students get 8 to 12 weeks to do the project. They'll also have to write up the project too, so make sure there's space for that writing up, as opposed to work until the deadline for that. I think Joanna mentioned about assessing risks too. What are the risks? Make sure you think about these things up front, as opposed to you bang into them late in the day, which is a bit too late. So I think that's all I would say for that, Max. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I guess we'll open it up to the room. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to either throw them in the chat or unmute. Or
Max, can I say something just quickly, just following on from what Jerry is said there, is that often we hear about organisations that are actually really interested in employing their student, but they haven't got all the processes going early enough, and so they lose them. So that's just something to bear in mind, that if you do get a really good student and you've spent 8 to 12 weeks with them, you've done a lot of the groundwork, it's really you know, and if there is a possibility of future employment, then it's good to think about that right at the beginning, so that, you know, you can get the wheels in motion and capitalize on your investment in the student.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Thanks, Marianne.
Jens, if Jens is still here, Jens has had a lot of experience with the Data Lab MSc program and some really brilliant students. So I don't know whether you can share any reflections.
I think between Robert and Jerry, they've kind of covered most of our experiences as well, with like a positive engagement with the students, allowing them enough time to work on their written material, and definitely also, as Robert said, you know, leave aspect of the project open enough for the student to be able to show some initiative and stuff. We are in the fortunate or unfortunate situation of having too much data and not enough people to mess around with it. So having these students in is a great opportunity, a bit similar to what Robert says, mainly pilot products. But they made a real difference within our organization. And I know there's interest from several of my colleagues to try and get a student organized this year. So our biggest challenge is a bit like what Jerry has also talked about, but he was incredibly helpful with last year, was obviously with COVID and everything, and trying to get the sort of employment situation within government sorted out. I think we're back to normal this time, so it usually takes a while to get all the paperwork and everything sorted, but apparently we should be speeding up and becoming more efficient on that as well, so it shouldn't be as bad. So yeah, it's been a very positive experience for us the times we participated, for sure.
Excellent, thanks for sharing, Jens. I'll just run through a few of the questions that came up in the chat, just in case anyone hasn't seen those. So Susan asked, how far in advance of the project start would we have a named student, thinking of timing re-HR processes? Heather said, it depends on the timescales of when you submit your project and an appropriate candidate is confirmed. The first is typically confirmed in January, but depending on project submissions could still be April, May. So yeah, I guess maybe it's good to work back if you know you've got a particularly long HR process or issues in, I don't know, procurement or IT or whatever, then getting your project in earlier, we can get that match done earlier, and then it will just give a much bigger lead-in time in terms of getting those placements sorted. When we say next year, do we mean 2022? Yes, that's what we're talking about. So we're looking at the two cohorts. So the first cohort started their MSc September 2021, so they'll be looking to start placement May, June, July 2022, and then we have a cohort, much smaller one, that are starting their course in January 2022. So we'll be looking at their project placement in September, October through to December. And then,
if I can maybe ask, is it the second part of the cohort, the January start, that lose the ESF funding?
No, so we're considering those two cohorts as part of the 2022 season, if you like, and then from September next year is when we'll go down to September start next year. We'll go down.
No, that's clear. That's why I was wondering, because if it was linked to the academic year or if it's. But thank you.
And then Robert, I don't know if you've seen, but Joanna's trying to get you on the Data Lab podcast as well.
Okay.
And yes, then I think that probably covers everything. So if there are no more questions, I think we can sign off.
Could I just quickly check regarding reporting and the slides? Would you be emailing them, or how could we access them?
I think probably the easiest thing for me to do is to, if I can, send them out via an Eventbrite mail list. So maybe I'll do that. I'll collate them and then send them out that way.
Do you know when you would be able to do that, just so we have a
I'll try to get it out this week.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Bye.
Thank you.